Picture this. Uh, a severe storm just rolled through your town.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. The sky opens up, and it completely dumps like 3 inches of rain in a matter of 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you walk downstairs, and your stomach just drops. Water has gotten into your basement, or, maybe it's seeping under the back door, pooling all across the laundry room floor.
The worst feeling.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what is the very first thing you do?
Well, human nature usually takes over right at that exact moment. I mean, the panic sets in, and you look for an authority to just tell you it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's the immediate reflex for almost everyone.
Yeah.
You grab your phone, you dial your homeowner's insurance,
Naturally.
you start pacing around, snapping pictures of the puddles on your phone for documentation. Maybe you go rummaging in the back of the garage for an old wet, dry vac.
Right.
You open a window because the room already smells a little earthy, and you want to let it kind of air out.
Which is a huge mistake, by the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you just wait. You sit on hold, waiting for an agent to tell you what the next steps are.
And, I mean, from a purely financial and liability standpoint, wanting to document the damage makes total sense.
Sure.
But biologically speaking, waiting around and opening windows is just about the absolute worst possible way you could spend those first crucial hours.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are exploring the EPA's official flood cleanup protocols. And what we found is that there is this hidden ticking clock.
A very fast clock.
Yeah, a biological countdown that starts the exact second water breaches your house. So we're going to break down how to outrun that clock, and more importantly, why the ultimate weapon to save your home from total ruin is, well, it's probably sitting completely ignored in your utility room right now.
It really is a massive shift in perspective for most homeowners.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the stark difference between a minor, slightly annoying drying bill and a massive home-wrecking remediation project almost entirely comes down to the actions you take in the first 24 to 48 hours.
Okay, let's unpack this. To frame this up for you listening at home, when you are staring down at that flooded living room, you really have to stop looking at it as a static disaster zone.
Exactly.
It is not just a room with wet floors. It is an active microbial crime scene.
I love that phrasing.
Right. The suspect is already inside the building, it is currently multiplying, and you have exactly 24 hours to cut off its life support.
And viewing it as an active biological event really is the only way to tackle it effectively. To understand why that window is so terrifyingly short, we have to look at the enemy we're actually dealing with.
Mold.
Right. Why does the EPA specifically call out a 24 to 48-hour window? Like, what is physically happening on a microscopic level while you are just sitting there on a hold with your insurance agent?
And that brings us to the biology of mold. It's a word that makes everyone cringe.
Oh, absolutely.
But one of the most unsettling realities is that mold spores are completely ubiquitous. I mean, they're everywhere.
Everywhere.
They are in the air outside. You're floating around inside your living room right now. They're on our clothes. They're in the air of this very studio.
They are just an inescapable part of the natural environment. But, the operative word when things are dry is dormant.
Okay.
These spores are essentially just microscopic seeds sitting there, completely inactive. They are locked in a state of suspended animation.
Just waiting.
Exactly, just waiting for the perfect alignment of conditions to wake up. And they really only need 2 specific things to throw that switch, which are food and moisture.
And the food part is what I really had to wrap my head around. Because, I've always associated mold with like an old loaf of bread left in the pantry too long.
Right, or a piece of fruit.
Yeah, or maybe a rotting log out in the woods. But when you look at the EPA's definition of mold food, it's virtually any organic material.
It's basically your whole house.
Literally. We are talking about the paper backing on your drywall, the raw pine wood framing of your house, the backing of your insulation, dust particles, the cotton fabric on your sofa.
The interior of a standard modern home is essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet for mold spores.
Wow.
Because the building materials are largely derived from trees and plants, which means they are packed with cellulose. And to a dormant mold store, cellulose is an absolute feast.
So the food is everywhere.
The food is already present on every square inch of your house. The only thing keeping your living room walls from turning into a fuzzy green science experiment is the absence of that second factor, which is moisture.
Okay, wait. Let me challenge that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you're telling me my house is essentially built entirely out of mold food and these invisible spores are literally floating around us all the time, why isn't this wooden desk I'm sitting at covered in fuzz right now? Like, why aren't our homes just constantly consumed by mold?
Because the ecosystem requires a very delicate balance. Moisture is the singular missing ingredient holding that entire microscopic world at bay.
Huh.
When moisture finally gets introduced to the environment, like when those 3 inches of rain pool up under your back door and soak into the baseboards, that's when the spore wakes up.
The alarm clock goes off.
Exactly. It absorbs that water and begins to germinate. And within just a few hours, it starts pushing out these microscopic thread-like root structures called hyphae.
Hyphae. So these are like tiny little anchors digging into the materials of your house.
They are anchors, yeah, but they are also digestion tubes.
Gross.
It is gross. They physically penetrate the wet surface the spore landed on, and they start secreting enzymes to break down the drywall or the wood so they can absorb the nutrients.
Oh, wow.
And here is where that critical 24-hour clock really comes into play, because depending on the environment, that microscopic, completely invisible germination process turns into a highly visible, fuzzy colony.
And that's when you can see it on the wall.
Right. And once that colony matures, it immediately begins an exponential release of brand new spores into the air.
I mean, the compounding math on that is terrifying. Every single one of those thousands of new spores floats through the air, lands on another wet spot in your flooded room, germinates, grows roots, and releases thousands more.
It's a chain reaction. Which brings up the timeline. What's fascinating here is that the EPA gives a range of 24 to 48 hours, and that variability comes entirely down to temperature.
Okay. How so?
Well, mold's biological metabolism accelerates in the heat.
Oh, of course.
So if you are dealing with a flood in a warm, humid summer environment, say the power is out or the AC is off and the indoor temperature is climbing up toward 80 or 85 degrees, you are absolutely sprinting toward the 24-hour end of that spectrum.
So heat is like stepping on the gas pedal.
Exactly. The heat puts the biological clock into overdrive.
So the food is already baked into the architecture of the house. The heat is accelerating the metabolism of the organism, and the moisture from the storm was the trigger that woke it all up.
That's the perfect storm.
Right. So if we are racing this 24-hour biological clock, the immediate glaring question is, how do we radically strip the moisture out of this flooded environment before that exponential cascade begins?
And this is where we have to talk about the most unlikely hero in your home. It's the tool you already own, but you probably profoundly misunderstand how it actually works.
Yes, the central air conditioner. I think most of us view the central AC as just a temperature machine.
Right, a cold air dispenser.
Yeah, exactly. You feel hot, you walk over to the thermostat, you bump it down, and cold air blows out of the vents. But mechanically speaking, structurally, your air conditioner is a giant industrial-grade dehumidifier.
It is the most powerful moisture removal system you possess. To understand why it's your best weapon, we need to quickly demystify how it cools the air.
Let's do it.
Because an air conditioner doesn't just magically manufacture coldness and inject it into the room.
Right.
It actively pulls the warm, stale air out of your house through the return vents and passes that air over a set of extremely cold metal evaporator coils.
So it's basically the exact same physics as a glass of iced tea sitting on a patio table in the middle of July.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right.
Yeah, because when warm, humid summer air hits the freezing cold glass of iced tea, the air rapidly cools down, and cold air simply cannot hold as much moisture as warm air.
So it drops it.
Exactly. The water vapor gets squeezed out of the air and condenses into liquid water droplets on the outside of the glass. Your AC unit is just a massive continuous version of that sweating glass.
So it's literally wringing the humidity right out of the indoor air in the form of liquid water.
Precisely. That condensation drips off the cold metal coils inside your unit, falls into a drain pan, runs down a PVC pipe, and is safely expelled completely outside of your house.
That's amazing.
And it performs this extraction every single minute the compressor is running.
I was looking at the extraction rates for a standard residential AC, and it's staggering. A typical system pulls somewhere between 5 and 20 gallons of water out of the indoor air every single day.
It's a ton of water.
Just visualize that. Visualize taking 4 big 5-gallon buckets from the hardware store, filling them to the brim with water pulled straight out of the invisible air in your living room, and dumping them down the driveway.
It is a massive volume of moisture transfer. So when you are standing in a flooded house, you don't just leave the thermostat at its normal, comfortable setting. You need to actively manipulate the system to maximize that dehumidification process.
Right. The protocol is clear. You walk over the thermostat and drop it down to 68 degrees.
Make it cold.
Yeah, make it uncomfortably cold. And then This is the crucial step people miss. You switch the fan setting from auto to IN.
Yes. So important.
You don't want the fan cycling off when the room reaches the target temperature. You want maximum continuous airflow. You want the air constantly moving over those cold coils, pulling out moisture hour after hour.
You have to maintain that aggressive, continuous cooling posture until the environment normalizes. And you can verify this with a simple digital moisture meter, the kind you can pick up at any hardware store for about $15.
Cheap investment.
Very. You are aiming to get the indoor relative humidity comfortably below 50%, and you keep the system running until absolutely all visible water is gone and the surfaces feel bone dry.
Relative humidity actually means, because I think the physics of this are just fascinating.
Let's hear it.
So when a flood happens, the humidity inside your house spikes. Let's say it hits 90%. At 90% relative humidity, the air is like a completely saturated sponge.
It's physically incapable of holding much more water vapor.
Exactly. So if you have bulk water soaking into your carpet or sitting on your floorboards, that water naturally wants to evaporate. But if the air in the house is already acting like a saturated sponge, the water has nowhere to go.
It's stuck.
Right. It's like trying to wipe up a spill on your kitchen counter with a soaking wet rag. You're just smearing it around. The puddles stay on the floor.
Which is why running the AC continuously is so critical. By dropping the temperature and running the fan, you are aggressively stripping the humidity out of the air. You are essentially taking that saturated sponge and wringing it out.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The AC acts like this massive invisible vacuum. You create a dry void in the air by dropping the humidity down to 50% or lower. Now, the air is like a bone-dry, thirsty paper towel. It actively pulls the moisture out of the wet floorboard and the soaking drywall to try and fill the void.
It pulls it right out of the material.
Yeah, the evaporation rate skyrockets. The puddles dry up, the AC grabs that newly evaporated humidity, dumps it outside, and the cycle continues. You are weaponizing the air to starve the mold spores of the surface moisture they need to grow.
That cycle of vapor pressure deficit is exactly how professional drying works. But there is a massive caveat here that derails so many homeowners.
Oh, the windows.
Yes. Human instinct during a flood, especially if the house smells damp, is to throw open all the windows and doors to let a fresh breeze through.
The instinct to air it out is so strong.
It is a fatal error, particularly in warmer climates. If it is still raining outside, or if it is 90 degrees and 90% humidity in the aftermath of a summer storm, opening a window is the equivalent of pumping pure oxygen into a fire.
You're just feeding it.
Exactly. You are inviting vastly more moisture inside than you are letting out. To make that invisible vacuum work, you must tightly seal the house. Close every window, shut the exterior doors, and let the central AC do the heavy lifting in a closed loop.
All right, so the AC is the engine. It's the powerhouse of the drying process. But an air conditioner cannot evaporate a 2-inch deep puddle of standing water fast enough on its own.
No, it can't.
We have to talk about the physical grunt work. If you are standing in that wet house, what is the exact step-by-step triage protocol? Like, we know we don't call insurance first, so what do we actually do?
Well, you start with the most immediate threat to human life, which is electricity.
Safety first.
Always. Before you even think about drying a floorboard or plugging in a fan, you must turn off the power to the flooded area at the main breaker box. Do not wade into standing water in a basement while the outlets are still live.
That's terrifying.
It sounds dramatic, but water acting as a conductor for electricity is how people lose their lives in the aftermath of storms.
I mean, surviving a catastrophic storm just to get electrocuted in your own laundry room because you wanted to save a rug is a tragedy you can prevent with one flip of a switch.
Exactly.
Okay, so the power's secure. The next priority is bulk water. You have to physically extract the standing liquid.
Right, because the AC can handle the moisture in the materials and the air, but it can't magically transport pools of water. You need shop vacs, mops, submersible pumps, even old towels, if that's all you have.
Get it out.
The faster you manually remove the physical puddles, the less total water volume the AC has to process.
Once the puddles are gone, you hit what I think is the hardest phase, which is demolition and sacrifice.
Yeah, this part is tough.
Homeowners are naturally incredibly resistant to ripping apart their own houses, especially if things look intact on the surface.
Yeah.
But you have to address the hidden moisture reservoirs, starting with the flooring, specifically the carpet pad.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, the psychology is really working against you here. If you have wall-to-wall carpeting, The carpet itself might look salvageable, but the foam pad underneath it is the real danger.
Let's talk about why that pad is so dangerous. It's usually made of polyurethane foam. And if you look at that foam under a microscope, it's a massive network of tiny interconnected cellular bubbles. It is quite literally engineered to be a sponge. It absorbs the impact of your footsteps. But when a flood hits, those millions of tiny bubbles fill with water. Air currents from a fan just bounce off the top layer.
They don't penetrate.
Right. The air cannot penetrate deep into that cellular matrix. The pad will hold onto that floodwater for a week, incubating mold the entire time.
And the EPA guidelines are very clear on this. The carpet pad almost always has to be ripped up and thrown away. You simply cannot dry it fast enough in a residential setting.
No way.
Now, you can sometimes save the top layer of carpet if you extract the water, clean it, and prop it up with fans blowing under it within that 48-hour window. But the pad underneath is a total loss.
And this is where that psychological hurdle comes in. People stand in their living room thinking, well, maybe if I just point a fan at it, it'll dry out on its own in a few days.
Right.
But that hesitation, that desire to avoid throwing things away is exactly what allows the 24-hour biological clock to run out.
And that wicking effect doesn't just happen with floors, it brings us to the walls. Drywall is incredibly porous.
Right, capillary action. It's the same physics as taking a dry paper towel and dipping just the very tip of it into a spill on the counter. The water doesn't just stay at the tip, right? It climbs up the paper towel, defying gravity.
Exactly. When floodwater touches the bottom edge of your drywall, the paper backing acts exactly like that paper towel. It wicks the moisture upward. The gypsum core inside the drywall absorbs it and basically turns to mush. Yeah. You cannot just point a fan at a wet wall and hope for the best. If the water has wicked up more than a few inches, the standard protocol is that you must physically cut the drywall away.
2 feet up, right?
Usually 2 feet up from the floor, parallel to the ground, all the way around the affected area.
And you pull that wet drywall off so you can get to the insulation behind it. Because if you don't cut that wall open, you are leaving wet gypsum, soak-in wet paper backing, and damp fiberglass insulation completely sealed inside a dark, airless wall cavity.
Which means you've essentially constructed a custom-built, climate-controlled indoor mold farm.
Yikes.
The airflow from your AC will never penetrate the wallboard to dry the insulation behind it. I know it is emotionally devastating to take a razor knife and cut into your own living room walls, but making a clean 2-foot drywall cut on day one is vastly cheaper and safer than having a remediation crew come in a month later to tear down the entire structural framing of the house because the wooden studs have completely rotted through.
That sacrificial logic really applies to the furniture, too. This one hurts, but if upholstered furniture or mattresses get soaked in floodwater, you have to toss them. Period.
It's the exact same cellular problem as the carpet pad.
Right. The thick padding inside a sleeper sofa or an expensive mattress will trap water deep inside its core. No amount of AC or surface fans will ever reach the center of a couch cushion fast enough.
Never.
If you try to save it, you will just be growing a massive mold colony deep inside the cushions of your favorite chair. It might look dry on the outside, but every time you sit down, you're going to puff a cloud of microscopic spores right into your living room.
That is such a vivid image.
It's terrible. Saving a $1,500 couch just isn't worth creating a chronic 2-year asthma trigger for your kids.
Now, solid wood furniture can occasionally be wiped down and saved if you get the humidity under control quickly, but soaked upholstery is almost always a loss. Again, fighting that very natural instinct to try and save everything is what turns a salvageable water event into a total environmental loss for the home.
Okay, so let's check our progress.
Let's do it.
We've shut off the power, we extracted the bulk water, we tossed the spongy carpet pad, we made the hard cuts into the drywall, we dragged the wet armchair out to the curb, and we have the central AC absolutely cranking at 68 degrees with the fan locked on it.
Perfect.
The humidity is dropping, we're feeling proactive, but there's a massive blind spot we haven't covered. What happens in the places where the central AC's airflow cannot easily reach?
Yes. Remediation professionals refer to this as the silent failure.
The silent failure.
Because your central AC system is incredibly powerful, but it relies entirely on air circulation. It can only dry the air that it physically interacts with.
So it's about the microclimates inside the house.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where a pipe leaks in a small, closed bathroom, or maybe there was an unnoticed window leak in a guest bedroom where the door is normally kept shut.
Okay.
The AC is running beautifully out in the main hallway, scrubbing the humidity from the open living spaces. But because that bedroom door is closed, there is virtually no air exchange.
The air just sits there.
The air inside that room is trapped, stagnant, and completely saturated with moisture. 3 days later, you open that bedroom door, and you are immediately hit with the smell of a damp, musty basement.
The silent failure. The clock ran out in that specific room because the dry air from the AC couldn't reach it. So what's the fix? How do we ensure there are no microclimates left behind?
It requires active vigilance. In the days following any major water intrusion, even if you think the main living areas are clear, you need to physically walk into every single room in your home.
Just patrol the house?
Use your senses, smell the air, open up the dark closet doors and inspect the back walls. Look closely at the corners where the ceiling meets the drywall.
What are we looking for?
If you smell even a hint of that earthy mustiness, or if a wall feels unnaturally cold and damp to the touch, you have to treat that isolated space with the exact same aggression as the main flood.
And this is where the supplemental tools finally come into play. You don't necessarily need to rent fancy industrial air movers. A standard $20 box fan from the hardware store can completely save a room.
Moving air evaporates water exponentially faster than still air, but placement is key here. You don't just point the fan at a wet wall and leave the door shut.
Right.
You place that box fan right in the doorway of the wet room, facing outward, and you use it to physically push that localized, highly humid air out of the trap space and into the main hallway.
It's like a relay race. The box fan grabs the humid air from the bedroom and hands the baton off to the main hallway, where the central AC's return vent can suck it up, pull the moisture out over the cold coils, and dump it outside.
It forces the air exchange.
Yeah.
Now, if you have access to standalone portable dehumidifiers, they are fantastic supplemental tools. A good residential unit can pull an additional 30 to 70 pints of water a day out of a specific heavily soaked room.
That's huge.
They work beautifully in tandem with the central AC, but there is one critical rule you have to follow. You must manage the water they collect.
Oh, this is a great point. If your dehumidifier is collecting a bucket of water every 6 hours, do not just dump that bucket down the kitchen sink or into the bathtub if the house is already struggling with a moisture overload.
Please don't do that.
Right. Dump it outside. Or attach a garden hose to the back of the dehumidifier and run it straight out a window, sealing the gap around it with tape. You are trying to permanently evict the moisture from the building envelope entirely, not just relocate it from the guest bedroom to the kitchen drain.
It all comes back to managing the entire system.
So what does this all mean? Synthesizing all of this into a unified strategy. When I look at this workflow, dropping the AC to 68, locking the fan to on-N, setting up box fans in doorways to break up stagnant microclimates, and keeping all the windows tightly shut against the humid outside air, you are essentially constructing an artificial high-speed wind tunnel inside your home.
A wind tunnel, yes.
You are deliberately weaponizing physics and airflow to outrun the biological clock of the mold spores.
That is the perfect way to look at it. You are taking complete aggressive control of the indoor microclimate.
And to bring all of these protocols together to give you a definitive action plan, remediation experts have a very specific, unforgettable rule that completely flips our natural instincts upside down. When the next big storm rolls through and you find water seeping under your floorboards, do not call your insurance company first. Call them third.
It feels so wrong, but it's the only way to beat the 24-hour window.
Step 1. Secure the environment. Turn off the electrical breaker to the affected area and manually extract as much bulk water as physically possible with vacuums and mops.
Yes.
Step 2. Establish the wind tunnel. Drop your central AC thermostat to 68 degrees, turn the fan to on-N, and set up every box fan you own in the doorways to push air around.
Let it run.
And then step 3, you call your insurance agent, because the insurance adjuster can wait an hour on hold. The biological mold clock simply cannot.
The bottom line here isn't just about saving your carpet right, it's purely financial and health-based. Failing to follow this aggressive order of operations, hesitating because you want to save the wet couch, opening the windows to let a breeze in, or leaving the AC off to save power, is exactly why homeowners end up paying a $30,000 hazardous mold remediation bill a month later instead of a $200 utility and drying bill that week.
It's wild when you put it like that.
Your central air conditioner is, without a doubt, the most underrated life-saving tool in your house during a flood.
You literally already own the solution.
Yeah.
It's just sitting there waiting to be used correctly. Well, we've covered the biology of ubiquitous spores, the incredible physics of the AC's invisible vacuum, the emotional pain of triage and demolition, and how to hunt down those silent failures behind closed doors.
We covered a lot today.
We really did. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. But before you go, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to chew on.
Let's hear it.
We just spent all this time talking about how our air conditioners are secretly doing all this heavy lifting, constantly stripping moisture out of the air and keeping our homes dry and mold-free all summer long.
Right.
And in the winter, our heaters naturally dry out the air too. But what exactly is happening to our indoor air quality during those mild transition periods?
Oh, interesting.
The shoulder seasons in the fall and the spring, where the weather outside is just nice enough that we don't turn on the AC and we don't turn on the heater, sometimes for weeks at a time.
The AC never kicks on.
Right. If a heavy spring rainstorm rolls through and the ambient humidity in the house creeps up, but the AC never kicks on to wring out the sponge, is there a hidden microbial clock ticking right under our noses precisely when the weather feels perfect?
That's a great question.
Something to think about the next time you leave the windows open on a rainy April afternoon.